And, Madam President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President, in a few hours, this chamber will have the opportunity to restore benefits for 1.7 million American job seekers and help reduce the national deficit by $1.2 billion. I believe my colleagues understand that this is a fiscally responsible way to help job seekers who are still struggling in the aftermath of the Great Recession. UI helps people to look for work, while at the same time bolstering consumer demand and supporting the economy, which is why the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office has estimated...
Madam President, I would ask that any quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise today to speak in morning business.
Without objection. Please proceed.
I rise today to join my colleagues in calling on the Senate to pass an extension of the emergency unemployment insurance. I am deeply disappointed and frustrated that millions of hardworking Americans are now wondering how they will put food on their family's table and a roof over their heads because Washington has been unable to extend critical unemployment insurance. A few weeks ago, we had a bipartisan vote to move forward with debate on the extension of what is called emergency unemployment compensation. I hope we can build on that vote and move forward as quickly as possible to restore this vital lifeline before more Americans who have worked hard and followed the rules their entire lives before they slip from the middle class into poverty. The expiration of emergency unemployment insurance is an urgent problem for tens of thousands of Minnesotans and for millions of Americans. At the end of this past year, unemployment insurance expired for 1.3 million Americans, including 8,500 Minnesotans. If we don't renew that unemployment insurance over the next year, this lifeline will run out for another 3.6 million Americans, including 65,500 Minnesotans. These are real people. These are fathers and mothers. They're people whose families and local communities are struggling. As I've traveled around Minnesota, I've had the chance to speak with many of the Minnesotans who are affected by the expiration of unemployment insurance. It's not the fault of these people, of these workers, that they lost their jobs. Very often these workers were just unlucky enough to be working in the wrong sector of the economy at the wrong time. Sometimes they were from communities that lost a large employer. A few weeks ago, I held a round table with unemployed workers who had been helped by unemployment insurance, and these are long-term unemployed folks. And there were also some workforce professionals who were helping these folks and other people find a job in today's recovering economy. The unemployed women I spoke with, Ann, Amy, and Robin, had been working for decades and paying taxes for unemployment insurance for decades. One of them is in her 40s, a single mom with 2 kids, one a 3-year-old. The other 2 women are older workers, and one was in her 50s, the other in her early 60s. The one in her 50s was a meeting planner. When the recession hit, businesses cut costs by holding fewer meetings. And she had a very hard time, well, she couldn't find a job in her field, but is trying to find a job in any field. And these women, all of them, were working constantly trying to find a job. And some of them had been, actually they had all been skilling up, finding skills that they could to try to get an office job and be more conversant in Excel or some computer program. These women and all the Minnesotans I've spoken with have been working hard to find a job, but they face just a tough situation in our economy. In November, the Labor Department reported that for every job opening, there are almost 3 people seeking jobs. Now, that doesn't mean that you'll get a job if you apply for 3 jobs. A few weeks ago, a job counselor in Minnesota told me that there are often hundreds of applicants for every good job posting, and that these jobs are often filled then internally. And I'm glad that these businesses are hiring from within or promoting from within. But it's stories like these that highlight why we need emergency unemployment, to help those workers who are unfortunate enough to be working in a sector that has experienced a major downturn, or live in a community where it's just particularly hard to find a job, and particularly at their age. One of the women I met at the round table, Ann from Eden Prairie, had also written me. What she told me really illustrates the situation that so many Minnesotans are facing. Ann wrote this. Excuse me. I've been extremely active in my job search, but have regrettably not found new employment. My Minnesota unemployment insurance ran out last week, and I applied for federal emergency unemployment compensation just this past week. Excuse me. I ask you to please ask yourself what you would do to provide for your family. I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. I am the sole provider for my family. I am not looking for a handout, nor do I believe that staying on unemployment insurance is in my best interest. But the $483 a week it provides will at least allow me to make my mortgage payment. Ann was a remarkably articulate. She volunteers at her son's school. She volunteers at the son's school partly. She wants to be involved in her son's life, but also to network. One of the counselors there said the hardest job there is looking for a job. Minnesotans like Ann and the millions of Americans around the country in the same situation, many of them have worked for decades. Every one of these women had worked for decades and had been paying to unemployment insurance for decades. They don't deserve to be punished or to lose their homes because they're unable to find a job within 26 weeks. And often they need their unemployment so that they can have gas in the car to look for a job. so they can keep their phone. The economy is recovering, but things are still tough for many people. Now is just not the time to cut off unemployment insurance. Not only is unemployment still above average, but the long-term unemployed, workers who have been looking for work for at least 6 months, make up 37% of today's unemployed. Congress has never allowed extended unemployment insurance to expire when the long-term unemployment rate is as high as it is today. Today, the 2.5% long-term unemployment rate is nearly double the level when previous emergency benefits were allowed to expire. And the current unemployment rate of 6.7% is 1.1 percentage points higher than when President George W. Bush signed the current round of emergency unemployment compensation into law. So we know that the unemployment crisis is not over. It remains a significant issue for workers, especially older workers, who experience longer terms of unemployment, longer periods of unemployment than younger workers when they lose their jobs. Extending unemployment insurance also makes economic sense. In 2011, the Congressional Budget Office stated that aid to the unemployed is among the policies with, quote, the largest effects on output and employment per dollar of budgetary costs, unquote. CBO estimates that extending benefits through 2014 would help expand the economy and contribute to the creation of an additional 200,000 jobs. The Council of Economic Advisors estimates that without a full-year extension, the economy will generate 240,000 fewer jobs by the end of 2014. Unemployment insurance has been shown to help people stay in the workforce, allowing them to contribute to our economic recovery rather than letting people slip into poverty. The Census Bureau estimates that unemployment benefits kept 2.5 million people who are trying to stay in the workforce out of poverty in 2012 alone, and have kept 11 million unemployed workers out of poverty since 2008. Extending unemployment insurance for those who need it is far from the only thing we should be doing to help people get back to work. I've spoken many times about one of my highest priorities in this area, addressing the skills gap by supporting workforce training partnerships between businesses and community and technical colleges. And there are other things we should be doing, like rebuilding our infrastructure. But it would be a tremendous mistake to fail to renew the unemployment insurance that has lapsed. When people like Ann and Robin and all those I meet around the state of Minnesota and the millions of others around the country, when they're looking really hard for work, and I'm talking about these people are working hours and hours a day looking for work, and it's almost 24 hours a day, because they keep their phone on. And they are thinking about it constantly. Let's not pull the rug from under them now. They are trying to catch up in an economy that is recovering but still has a long way to go. We shouldn't be jeopardizing their family's economic security, and we shouldn't be jeopardizing our nation's economic recovery with short-sighted decisions like letting this critical safety net expire. Thank you, Madam President, and I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.
President,
The senator from New York,
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
without objection.
Madam President. Madam President, I rise to speak of my colleague, our friend, Senator Baucus, who hopefully will be confirmed by the Senate to his new post in a few hours. I've known Senator Baucus, of course, since I've gotten to the Senate. But even before that, one of my first impressions of him was his picture, the picture of Senator Baucus in his white cowboy hat on his ranch in Montana. To me, kid from New York City, he sort of looked like the Marlboro Man. He was handsome. He was in the cowboy hat. I think there were horses and mountains in the background. And so I said, wow. When I met Senator Baucus, I found his heart and his brain and his soul were every bit as good as the outside. He was a great leader of the Finance Committee. First, he had great intellect. Max Baucus would see an issue, understand the issue, get to the heart of the issue quicker than almost anybody else. He understood the vagaries of legislation, and he knew how to try and get things done. He always worked in a bipartisan way. He reached out to Republicans. Many criticized him sometimes for doing it, but given the gridlock in this body, I think in retrospect everybody would think, wow, that was what we should be doing. And he tried and tried and tried. Of course, his crowning achievement legislatively was health care. And I know that there are some, particularly on the other side of the aisle, who will criticize it, but I have no doubt that Max Baucus will be regarded as a giant in what he did in coming up with a health care reform bill. I have no doubt that as the bill rolls out, as the kinks are worked out, and as the bill moves forward, it will be regarded as landmark legislation, one of the pieces of landmark legislation of this decade and this century, and it wouldn't have happened without Max Baucus. There are 37 million Americans who now have access to health insurance, a whole generation of young adults who are insured through the age of 26, and protection of all Americans with pre-existing conditions because of the diligence, the never-give-up attitude that Senator Baucus had. And so many other things in the bill. Getting after the private insurance companies. Community health centers are providing health care for the poorest among us in a better way. And this is one of many, many issues that Max Baucus took the lead on. He was, as I say, a premier legislator, working long and hard, figuring out what he thought the right thing to do was, trying to get colleagues from the other side of the aisle as well as on our side of the aisle to support it, and then getting it done. The list of his accomplishments are long. He took the bull by the horns, never, never backing off. And so, Madam President, I know that Senator Baucus will be an outstanding ambassador to China. It's one of the most important foreign policy positions that our country has to offer. And having someone with Max Baucus's acute mind, great persistence, and his good heart, his good soul, will mean a lot. One final point. Not only are we going to miss Max, we're going to very much miss his wife, Mel. She is terrific. They met not too long ago, and I know how happy they make each other, and I think that makes all of us feel happy as well. So, Max, you're truly the best of the last best place, and we will all miss you. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President, in a few hours, this chamber will have the opportunity to restore benefits for 1.7 million American job seekers and help reduce the national deficit by $1.2 billion. I believe my colleagues understand that this is a fiscally responsible way to help.
Madam President, need to suspend the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you for that. I want to talk about the workplace some and the impact of the Affordable Care Act on the workplace. We all saw the story come out yesterday that had tripled the number of working hours, the number of jobs that in 2009 the same group, the Congressional Budget Office, thought would be the victims of moving this way on health care. Now, in fairness to everybody, it was at the time said that if we did this, it would cost us 800,000 jobs. Yesterday said 2.3 million jobs. So it's, I guess, not like anybody who voted for this voted for it without at least somebody saying that was supposed to be an impartial observer that there would be substantial workplace cost. But now that same group, looking at what's happened, looking at the application, looking at the way the law is going to affect, says probably going to be 3 times as many jobs lost because of this, people not adding jobs, people moving from part-time, full-time work to part-time work. And so just another strong indication that the Affordable Health Care Act has not been a good thing for the workplace, and I think we're more and more seeing that the Affordable Health Care Act is not a good thing for health care for most people. I'm sure out there somewhere, just the law of averages, there are people who benefit. I think there are other ways we could have reached out to those same people and included them, but I just brought with me to the floor today some of the letters and emails and other postings that have come in. We've verified all these with the people involved, one, to be sure they didn't care if we used even their first name and where they're from to talk about this, and 2, to be sure that these stories, some of which are just almost beyond belief, that we'd have a program that I believe the people who were for it were well-intentioned that has produced this kind of results. One letter from John in Farmington, Missouri, who says he's one of the founding shareholders of his company and has been since 1975. They've provided insurance since that time, but this year their insurance person came to them and said that there'll be a 50% increase when they renew later this year. They're currently paying, in this small company, $18,000 a month is what they'll pay instead of the $12,000 they were paying. And John's letter, he says, we're a profitable business, but we're not so profitable that $6,000 a month doesn't make a big difference to us when our insurance premiums go up 50%. Lisa in Baldwin, Missouri, says that she's actually an insurance broker, and she contacted us to talk about the examples that many of her clients have had in the way they were affected by the health care bill. One is, I have a family of 5 people, a husband, a wife, and 3 children who were paying $437 a month for their health savings account plan. Their rate for a comparable plan under the Affordable Care Act was $805 a month. So that $437 that family was paying, if they replace that out of everything else they're doing in a given month, it's no longer $437,000 of the budget that goes for health care, it's $805. She says, I've quoted plans for numerous people over the last few months. All have less benefits than what they currently have and are far more expensive. Doesn't say some, it doesn't say most. This is from a person who does this for a living. She says every case that she has quoted that's been higher cost, less benefit. William from Deloge, Missouri, says that his wife had a pacemaker installed 3 years ago. Recently, she called to set up her checkup for the pacemaker with the hospital that they've always gone to, and she was told that due to budget constraints placed on the hospital because of the Affordable Care Act, they no longer provide these services. And so now, according to William, instead of driving 10 miles for for these services, they have to drive 60 miles one way. Driving 120 miles or to 150 miles even, he says, possibly to get to one of the places they could go in St. Louis. They used to go 10 miles, and the reason the hospital gave is that the Affordable Care Act has created that. Another letter from a broker. I have a client in her late 50s who makes around $20,000 and qualifies for the subsidy. Even with the subsidy, her premium was around that she pays was around $300 a month for the lowest possible level of plan. I think that's called the bronze plan. For the lowest plan, her subsidy, $300 a month, and that was about 50% more than she had been paying for comparable coverage. Someone else, Mark and Janet in Platte City, Missouri, were informed in September of 2013 that as of January 1, their premium would double. Our company, that's what they say in their letter, while we do not think, this is their phrase, we do not think Obamacare as it stands now is good for the nation, at least it was an attempt to do something. This is people that were hopeful about this, still not critical of those who were trying to do something, says at least it was an attempt to do something about out-of-control medical costs. It needs serious revisions, and part of it should be repealed. People in their 60s don't need maternity coverage, and mental health and substance abuse coverage should not be mandatory either. At least that's the view of Mark and Janet in Platte City, Missouri, and it's my view as well. Mary Ann in Scott City, Missouri, says that she's had continuous health care coverage for 36 years without ever having a day without health insurance coverage. After being diagnosed with cancer, her insurance was canceled, and she was forced to get insurance somewhere else. Now, why was her insurance canceled? She had been on the high-risk pool that the state runs. There were ways, Madam President, that I proposed in 2009, and we could all look at another way to do this, to have expanded those high-risk pools. I think by the time the high-risk pool in Missouri went out of existence on December 31, there are slightly more than 4,000 people still on it. Based on my letters, I think eventually we're going to get 4,000 letters. Because what were they paying? They're paying 135% of what would have been the premium that everybody else was paying, but they had a high risk already, and they were generally able to go to the doctors they wanted. They're generally, in the letters we get, no longer able to go to the doctor you want. And your doctor is important, but your doctor is frankly more important to you if you've been sick. If you've been sick, if that doctor has been your doctor through this process, it's something that Mary Ann and others would like to have finished. And let me read one other thing to be sure I fully understand it. As of December 23rd, I was finally able to enroll. It cost me more, and I'm getting less. Unbelievably, healthcare.gov wouldn't allow me to enroll my healthy 18-year-old son. I thought he was the healthy young person they needed in order to make this program work. And she goes on, and that may have just been a website problem. The website will be solved. The President said recently that the website was working exactly the way it was supposed to already, and so maybe it has been solved, though I don't think the appeals process is working yet. I'm told there are lots of people appealing information that somehow wrongly got into the website. They can't get that solved. Mary Ann continues to say, the ACA has been a disaster for me and my family. Shame on us for letting this happen. I want my old insurance coverage back. I don't appreciate being mandated at the last minute to buy something that has inferior health coverage. It's administratively inept and costs more. Please resolve this disaster before it gets worse. Myron in Hannibal, Missouri, to quote from his letter, my company told me last November to go to my wife's group health insurance plan because they didn't know how the government plan was going to work out. On advice of my insurance broker, my company got me off their group policy. As a result, my health insurance premium went from $198 a month to $549 a month. Natalie from Meadville says this: my health insurance costs for my family of 4 have doubled and my benefits have decreased. I no longer have office visit benefits and my deductible has gone from $3,500 to $10,000. I raised my deductible to try to lower my insurance premiums at the end of 2014 when we were forced to sign up. We'll probably cancel our insurance if we think it's just cheaper to pay the penalty. How many letters we have that say my premium's gone up and my benefits have gone down would be a huge number of the people have contacted us. Pat from Kansas City says that she's worried about her kids. Her oldest daughter and her family, her premium went from $5,000 to $10,000 a year. Scott from Lee Summit, he says his premium went up 27% for himself and his son, and he was told that it would have gone up 7% anyway, but the 20% of that 27%, or actually more than 20%, the 20% of the increase was because of the change in health care policies. I think that the more we know the kinds of things we could do to make the health care system work better. I'd like to see us get back to doing that, and until we do, these letters are going to continue to come in, and we're going to continue to try to help these people find a better answer, but the government involvement here may mean that there's not a better answer until the government figures out how to create a bigger marketplace and more choices and let people have the health care they think meets their family's needs, and I would yield the floor.
Senator from California.
Madam President, what is the order of business right now?
Senate is considering the unemployment compensation bill.
Well, Madam President, I rise to talk about the absolute necessity to pass this unemployment compensation bill. And we should do it because it's the morally right thing to do. It's the economically right thing to do. And we have listened to our Republican friends, and even though they always said in the past, don't worry about paying for it, they passed it almost 5 times under George Bush without paying for it. Now all of a sudden they said pay for it, and we do pay for it in this bill. So I don't know what it is they exactly want. They claim they are empathetic to people unemployed and long-term unemployment. We know that rate is very, very high, long-term unemployment, even though we know we have seen in the last, I guess, how many months, 8 million jobs since about six months. But not everybody is fortunate to get those jobs, clearly. We came out of the worst recession since the Great Depression, brought about by Wall Street, happened under George W. Bush. We were bleeding jobs, 700,000, 800,000 jobs a month. It was frightening. The GDP was contracting. President Obama turned it around. I predict he'll go down in history as one of the great presidents because we were almost flat on our backs, and yet he acted. And luckily we had a few Republicans that helped us pass that stimulus, which in my state made a huge difference and all over the country, got us on our feet. We've made reforms that are very important. And I also have to say, the bad news bears on the other side. Every day, negative stories and negative stories and negative stories about Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. And I dare say they ignore the millions and millions and millions of Americans who for the first time are able to get affordable health insurance. It's private health insurance, not a government-run system, except for the Medicaid part, which we expanded. The exchanges are private insurance. They are able to afford it because the way we wrote the bill, there are subsidies for the middle class on those exchanges, which is making affordable for people. You should see the letters that I get. I've read many of them and put them in the record. People who had a pre-existing condition, who never could get health care before, they write me there thanking God that we passed that bill. Their kids who were going to be thrown off their health care are now on that health insurance till they're 26 years old. Being a woman is no longer an excuse to have your rates doubled and tripled. It's not a pre-existing condition to be a woman anymore. If you have diabetes or you've had cancer, you still get your insurance. The insurance company can't walk out on you just when you need it the most. Come on. I say to my Republican friends, step up to the plate. Yes, we have kinks in the system. We knew that when we said if you love your insurance, you could keep it. I admit I should have said if it meets the basic standards, because we don't want people having junk policies, but we fixed that. President has stepped up to the plate and fixed that. So all they do is focus on the negative while people are on their knees thanking God they have health care, many for the first time. I kind of stunned at it, really. I really am. And we are ready, willing, and able to fix whatever glitches there are, and the President's been totally honest about the disastrous rollout. We understand that. Despite that, we've got millions and millions of people with new affordable health care for the first time. And now we look at extending emergency federal unemployment insurance for the long-term unemployed. We did not act in December. That was a moral outrage. We didn't have the votes. The Republicans are filibustering. We need to get 60. So 1.7 million Americans have lost their extended benefits since the end of December. In my home state, 276,000 people have lost their extended unemployment benefits. Think about it. 276,000 Californians. Some of our states have populations of 600,000, 700,000, 265,000 people just in California. What does that mean? It means they're suffering. It means their families are suffering. It means they are faced with disaster. And it also means they can't go down to the corner store. They can't go fill up their car with gas. They've got all these problems, and it trickles down through the community, and the community is hurting. That's why we know our bill is so important, because it not only helps the individual, it helps the communities. We know that GDP is, in fact, affected if we don't act. Last month, my colleagues from the other side blocked a one-year extension of unemployment benefits, even after we offered to pay for it. And we gave them votes on the amendments of their choice. We gave them everything they asked for. It's never enough. We had one Republican senator, and I thank Senator Heller, who voted for cloture last month. And I just hope my colleagues will listen to the people and support this extension. I would like to, for my remaining time, read to you, Madam President, some of the letters that I'm getting and emails I'm getting from real people. Real people. Quote, this is Kristen from Chatsworth. I am writing to you to please continue to help get an extension on unemployment. After working over 10 years in the clerical field, I was let go. I was on unemployment. I have been constantly searching for jobs, and after rejection, I have not given up. It's scary to hear my claim will be up after 26 weeks of unemployment. I don't know how I'll make ends meet if they don't extend unemployment. I know I'm not alone on this subject, and millions are as scared as I am. I have never been on welfare or any assistance, even being a teenage mother. Now, my friends on the other side are always talking about how if a teenager gets pregnant, she should have the child. Here's someone who did that. I mean, we should help this woman. We should help this woman. Here's another one. Jay from Albany. Please keep pushing for the unemployment extension. I am one of those who was cut off in December. I'm 61, have 3 college degrees, and I'm a Vietnam-era veteran. This is a man who's a Vietnam-era veteran. He has 3 college degrees, and this is what he says. I am not a number or lazy or a stupid individual, as some Republicans would like you to believe. Those checks are our only lifeline. With several layoffs in the last 12 years, he writes, the dot-com crash, and the worst economy of my life, I have sadly had to run through my life savings and 401ks. Think about it. Having to run through your life savings and your 401k. Think about it. A veteran who put his life on the line for his country. And he's insulted that the Republicans are intimating that he's lazy or stupid, his words. This is what this man writes, and then I'm going to yield my time so my friend from Montana can add his eloquence to this. This is what he writes. I have worked since I was 15, and I fear I may be homeless soon if I don't get those federal unemployment checks. Listen to what he says. I eat 1 meal a day, and I'm starting to feel quite desperate. Please convince your colleagues that this is something we all paid into and desperately need now and not in a month or two. We're not receiving welfare checks, but checks we worked for and earned. I know you've always stood up for your constituents and those in times of need. I pray, he writes, I pray you're successful along with your fellow senators and representatives. This is Jay in Albany. Jay, there are a lot of us here who are not giving up on this. Your voice is heard. I have to close with this one thing because it's so important. Sylvia from Pasadena, this is how she talks about this. I want to be a normal person again and talk with my friends and family about my day at work and what I achieved for my company and the recognition I received from my boss. I'm not a lazy woman. I want and need to be a normal woman with a fair chance at finding a job. I want my government to be patient and show some compassion. Instead, I get members of Congress calling me names, making me feel ashamed for losing my job through no fault of my own, making me feel desperate because I don't know how I'll be paying my bills. And Sylvia writes to me, please don't give up on me, Mrs. Boxer. I ask you to continue to fight, as I can still provide value to this great country. I believe I'm worthy of a little compassion and not name-calling. Madam President, these letters move me to tears, and I am not afraid to say it. I am not afraid to say it. Our friends wanted a short-term bill. That's what they have before them. Our friends wanted a pay-for. This is a pay-for they've agreed with. If they don't help us today, when I say help us, I mean help those who have written to all of us with their stories. They are turning their backs on the backbone of this nation. I yield the floor.
Madam President,
Senator from Montana.
I want to thank the Senator for California for his remarks. Very quickly, before I get into my prepared remarks, we've just come through one of the worst. We have come through the worst depression since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Unemployment is still at 7%. We need to get it lower. Bottom line is there's still some folks out there that need some help. And as the economy continues to improve, we're not where we need to be yet, but we ought to give those folks the help they need to get back on their feet, to give them the hope that they need to re-enter the workforce and become valuable parts of our economy again. Madam President, there's a beautiful small town in the farthest corner of northwest Montana. The town is called Libby, and it sits in the heart of the Kootenai Valley, surrounded by majestic snow-capped mountains It's a beautiful place. But despite Libby's postcard-worthy views, the town has a troubled history. Starting in 1919, mining companies began pulling vermiculite from the mountains outside of town. Vermiculite was used to bake, to build soil in gardens, to insulate buildings. And it wasn't long before the families of Libby began to pay the price for keeping their fellow Americans warm. Mining vermiculite exposed Libby's miners and residents to asbestos dust. That asbestos got into their homes, their schools, and eventually their lungs. And over the decades, hundreds of folks in Libby died from asbestos exposure, and thousands more continue to suffer today. When the W.R. Grace Company bought the mines in 1963, the company denied that asbestos caused the illnesses plaguing the town's residents. Instead of sounding the alarm, they kept quiet while building corporate profits on the backs of Libby's suffering families and workers. Word about Libby's fate finally made it to national news in 1999. The plight of Libby's families caught the attention of one man in particular, Montana's senior senator, U.S. Senator Max Baucus. Max soon began his crusade to get the EPA and the Department of Health and Human Services to take action. Despite Max bringing countless government officials to the northwest Montana to see what asbestos had done to the men, women, and children of Libby, it took 10 years for the government to declare this region a public health emergency, the first of its kind. Thanks to Max, Libby today is home of the state-of-the-art medical clinic that screens and treats residents for asbestosis. Thanks to Max, the Affordable Health Care Act extended Medicare coverage to everyone in the emergency zone. And thanks to Max, funds are flowing into Libby to remove asbestos from homes, schools, and playgrounds. Due to Max's hard work and the determination of the people of Libby, the town is slowly putting the sordid legacy of W.R. Grace in its rearview mirror. Max's hard work for the people of Libby is the Max Baucus that Montanans have come to know. But Max's work for the people of Montana started many years before he led the fight to help the folks in Libby. In the early 1970s, when Max started in public service, he traveled to Butte to meet a fellow by the name of Harp Cody. Harp knew the lay of the land in Butte, but he didn't know Max, and Max didn't know Butte. Harp was instantly impressed with Max's willingness to work, or as Harp says it, Max's fire in the belly. Max asked Harp to introduce him to Butte's leaders and voters, and unlike other candidates, Max didn't want Harp to lobby the folks at Butte on his behalf. Instead, Max went door to door himself to win their support. That kind of work ethic, where you put your own shoe leather into the fight, is the reason Max's many achievements in Congress. Achievements that include saving Social Security from privatization, leading the charge to modernize the Clean Air Act, passing 6 farm bills and 3 highway bills to strengthen Montana's and America's economy. Now, folks in Washington don't always recognize Max's hard work. And in a town where too many people race for the nearest TV camera, Max's preference for hard work doesn't always do him any favors. And that's practically a mortal sin around here, but not for Max. Max has represented Montana in Congress since 1975. His long record of service proves that Montanans don't want a showman. They don't want someone who yells across the aisle. They want someone who will reach across that aisle and find a way to say yes, even when saying no is the easier thing to do. Just like the folks in Libby, Montanans want someone who will work hard for them, who will get results and fight to improve our quality of life. Montanans found a soulmate in Max Baucus. I first met Max in 1998 at an economic development meeting in Havre, Montana. Max is famous for his economic development summits in Butte, so it was no surprise that we first crossed paths when Max was working to improve Montana's economy. At that point in his career, Max's record was already impressive. In 1972, as director of Montana's Constitutional Convention, Max helped pass one of the most progressive state constitutions to date, enshrining protections for clean air, for clean water, and the right to a quality education into law. He then walked the entire length of our state to introduce himself to Montanans and win a seat in Congress, meeting more men and women along the way like Harp Cody. As Max gained experience in the Senate, he became chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee. Soon thereafter, well into his 50s, Max hiked 820 miles from one corner of our state to the other to earn the support of Montanans during his 1996 reelection. Now, Max, in your new role as ambassador, take my advice. Don't try walking from one end of China to the other. Max next rose to become chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. As chairman, Max didn't have the luxury of not getting the job done. Now, the Finance Committee has been home to some of our nation's hardest working senators and greatest examples of bipartisanship, because failing to support critical programs like Social Security and Medicare is simply not an option. On the Finance Committee, you can't sit back and throw stones. You have to roll up your sleeves, you have to find common ground, and you have to get the job done. And that's what Max did. He passed legislation to reduce Americans' tax burdens, improve children's health, and most recently, to reform our nation's broken health care system. Max's penchant for hard work and thoughtful, independent-minded leadership stems from another great Montanan that he and I both admire, former Senate Majority Leader Mike Mansfield. Max met Mike as a teenager, and for many Montanans of today, myself included, Max connects us to Mike's legacy as a champion for the greater good, as a champion for putting service and sacrifice well before self, and as a champion for Montana. Montana's leaders always put Montana first, and Max is no exception. Just like Montana has shaped Max, Max has shaped Montana. Max's dedication to our public lands is legendary. Montana is known as a treasure state because of our incredible natural resources and unrivaled public spaces. From Yellowstone to Glacier, Montana is a place like no other, and throughout his career, Max has set out to preserve our treasured lands for future generations to enjoy. In 2008, the same year he won re-election and became the first person to win all 56 counties in Montana, Max helped set aside 320,000 acres of prime hunting and fishing lands across our state. This land, which will forever be open to the public, is part of Max's brainchild called the Montana Legacy Project. Max's love of our outdoors extends to those who share his love, and in March of 2000, he came to the Senate floor to remember a young Montanan, Sean Michael Miles, who had tragically died in a car accident just over a year before. And he dedicated his scholarship in Sean's name, and Max repeated Sean's words. I know this land may pay a price for being beautiful as change advances, carrying with it the prospect of loss. It is a land I desperately love. It is a part of me. It hurts so much to care so much. Yet, as a Westerner, I am invited to breathe it all in deeply each day. Max, Sean would be proud of your hard work to preserve our treasured places, and I pledge to carry on your efforts so Montanans can continue to cherish our special places and pass our traditions down to our kids and our grandkids. But it is not a stretch to say that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Max Baucus. Max has brought world leaders to Butte for his Economic Development Summit. He brought camera crews onto construction sites and small businesses as part of his famous Montana Workdays. He operated forklifts in warehouses, made bread in Montana's bakeries, and dug ditches, all to get a better feel for what hard-working Montanans do each and every day. And he fought for Montana farmers and ranchers who feed our nation. But he also helped bring a dryland farmer from Big Sandy, Montana, to the United States Senate. Max, I cannot tell you how much you've meant to me, as a friend, as a partner, as a mentor. I've lost track of how many meetings and rallies that we've attended together across our state, but I do know that each one you've had my back. So when I arrived in the Senate in 2007, it was because of you, that a guy with 7 fingers and a flat-top haircut quickly figured out how to get from his office to the Senate floor. It's because of you that I had a model for working across the aisle to pass thoughtful, responsible legislation, and because of you, I always know that I have a friend to turn to when I need advice. That's because, along with your tremendous staff, you've always put Montana first. And you've built the Montana Democratic Party into a beacon of common sense, freedom, and opportunity in the West. Our party is stronger because of you and your dedication to our state. After retiring from the Senate in 1976, Mike Mansfield became the ambassador to Japan. And now, you are poised to continue following in Senator Mansfield's footsteps as ambassador to China. I know that you will continue to serve Montana even as you serve our nation's interests overseas. I wish you the best. And while you're gone, I'll keep up your fight for Montanans, particularly the Montanans who need someone to fight for them. Montanans like Les Scramstead. Les was a longtime Libby resident. For years he saw politicians come to Libby with a promise to help. But that help never arrived. When Max came to Libby, Les told him he'd be watching. Les passed away in 2007, but before Libby began getting its help. But Max keeps Les's photo close, because in Montana, a promise to help is a promise to keep. That's the Montana way. That's the Max Baucus way. Max, it has been an honor to serve with you. It's an honor to call you my friend. And the Senate will be a lesser body without you. I wish you Godspeed and good luck. This is an incredibly important job, and I know you're more than up to that task. Thank you for your service to this Senate and to Montana and to this country. With that, I'll yield the floor. Press the absent quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.